Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. I'm Ben Pheloung. I'm the General Manager for Mantis, and we also have Emily Britton, who is the Head of Publishing for Mantis. Today we would like to talk to you about the new wave of contextual targeting that our industry is going to be using, how that works. We'd also like to talk about how Mantis works and how Mantis came about and how we're using that at Reach for contextual targeting and brand safety and across other publishers as well. Some of the challenges that people running contextual targeting campaigns are going to face and how to get around those and take advantage of how contextual targeting is going to work. And how AI can be a really powerful tool to provide both accuracy and scale for your contextual targeting activity. If anyone has any questions at any point, please stick them in the Q&A and we'll endeavour to answer them all as best we can at the end of the presentation. So why are we here? The writing's been on the wall for a while now. Both Safari and Firefox have made changes to their allowance of third-party cookies, and we've already seen around a 40% drop in the scale of third-party cookies available for targeting for advertising. Google's making changes as well, so that part of the industry that has been relied upon for a very long time is going to very quickly evaporate. One of the things that people are looking at to replace that and to help power their advertising campaigns is contextual targeting. Contextual targeting has been important in the past and then eclipsed somewhat by audience targeting, and now it is seeing a resurgence as people are looking to power their digital advertising campaigns again. We think we've got a good case for talking about that today because we at Mantis are a contextual and brand safety tool built in partnership with IBM Watson by Reach, and Reach is one of the largest if not the largest publisher in the UK. So we're going to take you through a bit about what Mantis is and how we think we can solve some of the contextual targeting issues. Emily, would you like to take us through how Mantis works and how it came about?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ben. So hi everyone, I'm Emily Britton. I'm the Head of Publisher Development for Mantis. So I'll take you through a quick overview of what Mantis is and why we launched it. So Mantis, as Ben said, is a brand safety and contextual targeting tool that was developed by Reach in partnership with IBM Watson to provide a publisher-led alternative to outdated keyword blocking and targeting strategies. So historically, buyers and sellers have managed brand safety and contextual targeting through keywords, which causes a lot of issues. But the key issue is that it causes publishers to lose out on revenue by blocking safe or contextually relevant content and therefore limits scale for brands. So we had a look into this internally, and at Reach, in some cases, we saw up to 75% of content being blocked as a result of keywords. So we wanted to solve this issue ourselves, but also be able to offer out an alternative from a kind of collaborative perspective out to the industry as well. So Mantis offers this AI-led alternative by leveraging IBM's AI tools and machine learning to truly understand the nature of a piece of content, taking the context into account. So as I mentioned, Mantis is a publisher-first solution. It's been designed by a publisher to put control back into the hands of the people that know their inventory best, being the publishers. We also know that brand safety and contextual targeting can no longer be a kind of one-size-fits-all solution. So it's really important to put content classification controls back into the hands of the people that understand the inventory and the content best. So in terms of how Mantis actually works, so Mantis scans the body of article content, ignoring any sidebar or read next content or any ads on the page, and then combines results from multiple metadata outputs to determine an accurate content classification. So to say either this piece of content is brand safe or this piece of content fits into this specific contextual segment. So those metadata outputs include things like categories, concepts, and entities, as well as providing scores for sentiment and emotion. So we have all this really great semantic analysis that we can use to inform segments for positive and negative targeting. So an example of this would be if a brand wants to block content that's relating to terror incidents, they may have words like bomb or attack on their keyword block list. By using Mantis, we can do it by blocking the concept of terrorism, which ensures that you're blocking the right content rather than blocking words when they exist in other contexts. So, for example, you might have a piece of Love Island content that uses the word bombshell, or sports content that uses words like attack and shoot. So this is a really great method for brand safety, but it's also really great for improving accuracy for contextual targeting. As those segments are built, again, on that same method of categories, concepts, entities, and sentiment, rather than looking for individual keywords taken out of context. And I'll just close off this section by talking about how we activate Mantis. So we have two key cookie-free options for integrating with Mantis. So when we want to integrate with a publisher directly, we will do that via the publisher's CMS system, which means that the content is classified for contextual and brand safety pre-publication. So before the content's even been pushed into a live environment, it has a Mantis classification. And what that means is it reduces the window of risk between a piece of content going live and a classification being made. It also means that there's no additional latency because there's no tags involved, and content can be reclassified as changes are made to the text. So if there's a piece of breaking news, for example, as that news develops and the text changes, Mantis will reread, rescan, and reclassify that content. And then the second way we can activate Mantis in a cookie-free environment is through marketplaces. So we've recently launched Xandr curated marketplaces with Mantis and a brand safety marketplace with Matterkind. So this way, buyers have access to inventory across multiple publishers that has been segmented into these intelligent and very easy to access contextual and brand safety segments. Cool, so now that we have an understanding of Mantis, I'm going to throw a question over to you, Ben. So as we get closer to Google's deprecation of third-party cookies in Chrome, brands are looking at ways to reach audiences through alternative methods. So before we get into contextual strategy, can you talk us through how context influences targeting?
Good question. I think it's contextual targeting, and certainly contextual categorization is really fundamental to how we as a publisher and advertisers access content and use content and understand content. If you think about a publisher site, one of the key data points that exists on any given page is something called an editorial tag, and that is the journalist who's written a piece of content telling our systems what that content is about. And it could be something like a football article about Manchester United, and they put an editorial tag saying this is about Manchester United. And all of the systems that key off that editorial tag look at that piece of information, and they use that to power their systems. And that could be a system that decides whether to place an ad unit on a page. It could be an audience segmentation builder. It could be something that measures engagement with particular topics from the audience and the people that are reading it. And that in turn informs what else is written about by that journalist and the rest of the journalists and their team. So that's a really powerful piece of technology, and it's really powerful because partly because it is written by a human. It's kind of human review, and by the journalist that knows the most about what that piece of content is about, i.e. the person that's written it. Where this falls over slightly, and where contextual categorization by a piece of AI comes in to help, is where you've got two journalists writing about the same topic, and they both decide to put a slightly different editorial tag on their pieces of content, either because there's a different spelling or a different way to describe the same thing. Back to that Manchester United example, you might have someone writing about Manchester United in Manchester who's put the editorial tag as MUFC. And then someone writing about them in London who's written it down as Manchester United FC or just Manchester United. And these different systems that rely on this consistent tagging start to fall apart a little bit here. and you've got anywhere between 10, 15, 20% loss just because there's an inconsistency. And that's where a piece of contextual AI can come in and act as a single standard of truth and reduce all of that these discrepancies down to zero. And that in turn makes all of those other systems that rely on that much more powerful. And that's going to be hugely important as advertisers are looking to run campaigns without third-party cookies, and will need to rely more heavily, not just on contextual targeting, but also first-party publisher data. Having that first-party publisher data be more powerful and larger in scale and more better informed is going to lead to stronger performance, because publishers are probably going to want to charge you more for audience targeting as well. So anything that is powered by consistent editorial tagging, AI can help with. Anything that is based on contextual targeting, that's all the other contextual signals on a page, like sentiment, like emotion, like a classification saying that this is about law, government and politics, crime, or the US elections. Having that consistent, checked in the same way and scalable is really powerful, because one of the things, editorial tagging powers audience information, but you can also stick other contextual segments into your audience behavioral segments as well on a publisher, and making that more robust is in everyone's interest, as this is more scrutinized as well. And finally on this, Emily's touched on this quite a bit, but contextual targeting and brand safety are two sides of the same coin. The clearer you can judge whether what a piece of content is about, the larger pool of safe inventory you have to play in, because you're not generating false positives saying a piece of safe content is unsafe and removing it from the pool of inventory you can play in. And that means, again, your contextual targeting opportunities become larger, and your first party audiences can be reached on more pages, and both of which are going to be really important. It also helps publishers a lot by freeing up a lot more safe inventory in a way that brands trust. Here we go. Time for a drink of water. Oh, you're on mute, Emily.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you. So my next question for you is, what should a brand consider before deciding on a contextual approach?
I think one of the key differences between how people have been operating targeting audiences and how they're going to have to change their way of thinking to using contextual targeting more heavily is that a lot of contextual targeting is really reactive, and it's much harder to forecast. It's reactive because it follows the news cycle, some of which you can predict. You can predict the Euro is going to happen with some degree, and you can predict that maybe the Olympics are still going to go ahead unless they're cancelled at the last second. And those events are, if not set in stone, at least something you can look forward to and do some planning around. But then you've got other events which pop up in the news cycle that you may want as a brand to own the advertising around. And you are going to have to be ready to pounce on those. So an example of that would be some work we're doing with holiday brands at the moment, and they want to appear around positive news around the hot weather. Now, you can set that up and you can plan for hot weather turning up in summer, but you're never going to be sure when that's actually going to happen and when the content is going to be written about that to serve your ads around. So you have to be prepared to be flexible and really responsive, or think ahead to what events are going to be occurring that you can own as a brand and appear around. And that means thinking about your creative message. That means looking far ahead to the kind of sporting calendar or what other events are out there. It also means that your availability of inventory is much harder to forecast. Certainly over the last couple of years, any kind of consistency we've seen in events, what's been going on in the world has been completely thrown out of the window. But even if you're looking at 2019 and 2018 before then, if you're looking at when the Euros were on, or the Champions League, then if you're trying to get avails from the month before that, your numbers would be way off, and trying to work out how much inventory you had to play with would be a real challenge. So you're going to have to make some predictions there. And this is one of the reasons why contextual is while it's a very powerful tool, is going to be just one part of kind of future media planning. And I think brands are going to have to work much more closely with publishers, both to understand from a publisher's point of view what contextual targeting looks like, successful contextual targeting looks like across that publisher, and what first-party data is available there to run really robust campaigns. Now, one of the great things about contextual targeting is that it is completely transparent. You should be able to see every page that you served an ad on for contextual targeting, which means it's completely auditable and you can judge whether it's effective or not. And this is quite different from audience targeting, which was always based on a relationship of trust with whoever was providing that audience. I think that means it's fantastic, because you can actually have a look under the hood yourselves and see what is where your campaign is running. It also could lead to being a massive time sink for everyone involved. I think there is going to be an acceptable level of accuracy that you have to live with for contextual targeting campaigns. An example that we had the other day was it was after Piers Morgan had been fired from Good Morning Britain. And there were several articles about Piers Morgan from being fired from Good Morning Britain that were appearing in one of our business news segments, because there was a huge amount of language in those about him negotiating for a new role at a new job. There's a lot of language there that was identifying that as a piece of business news with a relatively low confidence level, but enough to put that into that particular segment. That makes sense. I think there's the danger there of looking at that and saying, oh, well, this is a not perfect fit for what we're trying to achieve. And I think there's going to be a danger of digging into that stuff too deeply. I think it's worth checking and auditing and making sure that technology is doing what it says it's doing, but then stepping back and looking at the overall performance of the campaign in the same way you would an audience line, to see if it's actually delivering the performance that you need. Finally, with any kind of contextual campaign, same as audience, you need to be able to find articles talking about your favored topics in as many places as possible. And that's where, as Emily mentioned, the marketplace offerings come in, being able to target without cookies across multiple publishers, across premium publishers, potentially publishers that you've already got a trading relationship with, is going to be really important, because you can take advantage of an event turning up across multiple publishers at once. An example of that would be some activity we ran in partnership with the British Red Cross recently. They wanted to run advertising around content discussing the COVID crisis in India. And they wanted to activate across as many publishers in the UK as possible at once. Because any given publisher would be writing about it, but at a different and varying amount over the course of the window they wanted to run the campaign in. Okay. All right, Emily, over to you. How does Mantis differentiate from other contextual solutions in the market, and how is the AI part actually a key consideration?
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I think the first thing to say with differentiators, especially with AI-led technology, is accuracy, which we have touched on a fair bit here. But if you're looking for kind of accuracy over scale, then an AI-led contextual targeting strategy does allow for higher accuracy. So we've done a number of tests with Mantis. When we tested Mantis for accuracy against other contextual vendors, we found cases where keywords were being used for targeting, and that resulted into content being put into irrelevant segments. So one example of this was a piece of Formula One content on the Express, and using an ad inspector tool on the page, we could see the segments that one specific vendor had classified this content for, which included categories like new mums and some specific football teams like Burnley FC, which isn't obviously related directly to Formula One. So it's clear that keywords had been used and that this piece of content had kind of been taken out of context due to the reliance on the keywords. So using AI there certainly ensures that that context is being taken into account. I'll also say as well that in a recent review that we did with Mantis, we had an accuracy rating of over 95% for contextual. And again, that's a result of informing those segments through categories, concepts, entities, and sentiment, rather than just using keywords for contextual targeting. And I think that that kind of level of accuracy leads to trust. I think now, users are certainly more aware of how their data is being used by brands for advertising, and are more likely to build trust with a brand if ads are related, or if they are related to that content that they're actually reading. So the data that we use for Mantis for the AI-led strategy is all public domain. There's no GDPR or privacy considerations. Users don't need to opt in for advertising. So no matter the decision they make on their cookie preferences or their iOS opt-in, for example, the ads are still relevant because an AI-led tool has kind of decisions around the context rather than personal data. And then in terms of scale as well, we are able to kind of help to increase scale because, again, we're not relying on keywords. There is more relevant inventory available, and budgets certainly go further. Cool. So I have one last question for you, Ben. So to close out this session, can you talk us through your view on the future of contextual?
Yes, absolutely. So I think there's a few key things. One is how contextual is used as an industry standard. There's a lot of work we can do. Rather than people getting trapped in a battle with any contextual provider, it would be great if we could set some sort of industry standard in the same way that is an industry standard for brand safety. So people can go to a contextual targeting provider, see that they have been audited and they've got some sort of standard, potentially from the IAB, that their technology is going to find the right content for people's campaigns and that it can be trusted to do what it says it's going to do. And I think there's also going to be work between the different vendors and providers to set a standard as to what different categories actually mean. So people can have some sort of level of consistency between different providers, or at least have a clarity and one source of truth there as to what business news or law, government, and politics actually means in practice. That said, the flip side of that is the people that best understand the content are the publishers. So if they are giving you some guidance as to what the best content you should be targeting and the best way to access quality content at scale that is relevant to your brand or the campaign you want to run, then that's the first place you should be having a conversation. Just seen someone's asked a question here. Can Mantis identify networks of meaning and expand the scale of campaign in other related areas? I'm curious as to whether AI can identify another highly relevant related topics. Yes, absolutely. This is one of the powers of using the different metadata values that Emily discussed. Certainly concepts and entities allow us to find linked topics and what is a trending topic in terms of an initial piece of content and then the related pieces of content to that. And you can even take it one step further and you can have a look at first-party audience data, as in how someone who has behaved on one particular page, one particular topic, what other topics they are looking at, and then link that all back to another contextual targeting strategy. But all of that is, we've got a suite of reporting that allows us to identify the key interrelated concepts and entities and topics for all of the content that we're looking at. Again, that particular piece of the puzzle by itself doesn't relate to any first-party user data. It's just looking at trends and topics that journalists are writing about. That has the potential to be linked to engagement or audience information, but that would have to be done in a GDPR compliant way. Hopefully that answers your question, Stephen. Great. Are there any other questions from anyone in the audience? Yeah, we think so. But great, yes. If there are any other questions, ping Emily or myself on LinkedIn and we'll be happy to set up a discussion. We're part of the IAB Contextual Council to make some of the changes that we've spoken about turn into reality. And we're trying to help people use kind of cookie-free contextual in this kind of new world we're going to be living in. So thank you very much for having us.
Thanks, everyone.